Welcome back to the weekend show. Today we're discussing the culture of entitlement. Culture of entitlement establishes that there are people who have highly unreasonable expectations about what they deserve. Joining us to discuss this topic, we have
with us a life coach, town planner, and serial entrepreneur with a name I like, Lekadi Feboke. Welcome to the weekend show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here again.
Thank you. We also have with us Dariye. She is a delivery advisor with the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the show.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
ladies and gentlemen. And we also have to welcome Andy back because
Yes.
Andy has been writing exams for the entire month of
I
July.
know. I missed you guys.
We missed you too, and we hope you've passed those exams.
I have to. I need to tell my children I came first all my life, so it's very important that I pass those exams.
Very good to have you back and welcome
Thanks,
again.
Osasu.
So, as I said earlier, we're having a discussion today about the culture of entitlement. We've been able to distinguish the culture of entitlement in our personal lives and workplaces. Let's start with our personal lives. Growing up personally, I grew up in a well-to-do family, but my parents integrated the fact in my siblings and I that the only thing I owe you is your education. Everything else is a privilege. So we knew that after graduation, we would have to work our backs off to ensure that we made a name for ourselves and we were able to provide for ourselves going forward. But we've also realized that in many families, especially well-to-do families, there are a lot of kids who feel that the wealth that belongs to their parents also belongs to them. It's an entitlement also for them. What do you think about this, Lekadi?
Well, absolutely. I think some kids do not know that the "you owe me" attitude, which is the entitlement culture, is wrong. You understand? They don't have that sense of responsibility to what their parents, to themselves, to know that they ought to get their own achievements. You understand? When I was growing up too, I had that same kind of, my parents weren't poor, and I had that feeling like what belonged to my father was mine. Right, but I didn't quite know early because my father set a standard that we didn't even understand he had money until he went into politics. You know, so yeah, I think pretty much.
I think it reminds me of a biblical story, the prodigal son,
Yeah.
where he came and was like, you know what, give me my own share
I want everything
of the money now. But Joy, coming back to Nigeria, I almost now find it hard to distinguish where do we draw the line from respect and entitlement. So something happened today. I was coming somewhere, and the security man wanted to open the gate for me, but an elderly person called him. And so he left me, went to finish that, but he came back. And so I was like, this is your job. That's respect. Where do we draw that line between respect and entitlement?
I mean, I think in the specific example that you stated, you know, in Nigeria, I feel like we're not very professional in the jobs that we do. So I think that when it comes to something like a job, a lot of times people are quite informal and they're overly familiar, I feel, with their employers. So I think in that specific scenario, it's more about the training and managing expectations of both parties. Because at the end of the day, I think our culture makes us unique as a people, so we can't, you know, jettison that. But at the same time, I think there needs to be balance that when I realize that I'm in a working capacity, there's a certain expectation that there's a certain way I'm expected to behave. So I think in a professional setting, the onus is on the employer to make it very clear to the employees, these are our expectations, because you have it in the office space as well, where you have people, the way they greet staff, you can see someone maybe chewing gum, a receptionist, the way she welcomes staff, and you're like, that's totally inappropriate and it's very unprofessional.
And I'm glad you've talked about entitlement in the workplace because it's I've worked in the States and I've worked here in Nigeria, two completely different worlds. I have to admit. I was an intern for MGM and Ocean Spray and some other companies. And I knew my role as an intern. I knew I was meant to come into office at 8 a.m., meaning I'll be there by 7:45. Early is on time is late. I knew I was meant to close at 6 p.m., meaning that I would leave after 6 p.m., 6:05, wrap up my work and go. But working in Nigeria, having been employed abroad and having started my own business in Nigeria, two completely different roles. So my staff coming, and I praise them all the time because usually they come on time and they leave a little later than the closing hour. But it's because I've enforced that, I've trained them to think that way. But generally speaking, a lot of workers in Nigeria feel like they're entitled to some extra benefits for doing the job description stated on their employment letter. How do we respond to that, Joy? Like, how do we employees manage that? Because sometimes my tolerance level, my tolerance threshold is so lean and I just can't deal with that. So how do employees deal with a situation like that where staff, employees feel like they need to be overcompensated aside their salary, which is stipulated on their employment letter, for the work that they're expected to do?
I think the way I would respond to that is, first and foremost, I think you talked about the fact that you train them. So I think in the induction process, I think just before the show started, we're talking a little bit about compensation. So I think sometimes employees don't actually understand the cost of running the business. So variable cost, the fixed cost. So I think as part of the induction, I think there should be some level of an overview of this is actually the cost of running the company. Your salary is a variable cost and it's part of the cost, but this is not the only cost.
We have
so
to explain all of that?
I mean, no, I'm not saying in excruciating detail, but there should be a framework that you understand that just because I get maybe 10 million more, it doesn't just trickle down into your salary. There are other things that I'm supposed to spend on. Because the point is that you're saying abroad, people don't really have that expectation, but here clearly people do. So there's something we need to do to change that. And I think the second thing to address that is, if people genuinely think they're going above and beyond their job description, which is not what you're saying that just they want to get paid more for just doing their jobs. So I think that's a problem. But I think if there's maybe like a bonus scheme in place that is like, okay, you know what, this is your job. However, if you exceed your job on a consistent basis, then there is an incentive for you at the end of the year or something like that where you can get compensated, but it's not your right.
I mean, so, okay, I've worked somewhere before where, so resumption time was 8 a.m., so you had to be there at 7:55 a.m. A second after 8 a.m., you get fined 1,000 naira for each day. And so at a senior position, sometimes you have to work till about 7 to 9 p.m., where work ends at 5. But you don't get compensated for that. Now, in the same space, and this is in Nigeria, I've seen employers who tell their staff, you can't leave the office until I leave the office. Now, while in theory we talk about contracts and remuneration and all, but this to me is a form of entitlement in the sense that some of these people can sit down on their computers watching films or checking some blog and gossip site, but the employers feel entitled that if I'm being at work at this time to pay your salary, why do you have to leave work, even if it means stretching till 9, 10 p.m. So Lekadi, the area of employers, on the other hand now, being entitled to feel like we own you, there are no jobs after all, so you must stay here.
And as an addendum to Andy's question, because I'm guilty of that, I have to admit, on live TV, yes, but it's stipulated in their employment letter that yes, official closing hour is 6 o'clock, but sometimes we have to stay longer. So how do you respond to that, Lekadi? Am I a bad person?
If it's stipulated in yours, I'll be on your side.
I don't think you're a bad person expecting that, because sometimes the job may take you extra hours, right? But you have to have it in place to say you're going to be paid for those extra hours. You abuse the rights when you do not pay for those extra hours. I have personally had that experience. And let me give you another example. We didn't talk about employers who will call you in the middle of the night at your rest time that there's work you need to do, you know? So a lot of employers, because they know they've employed you and they're paying you, there's that sense of ownership, right? Rather than the sense of responsibility. Now, if the organization has that high sense of responsibility to their workers, they know their rights should not be infringed on. Yes, and so in most cases, especially in Nigeria, because a lot of things don't work too well, employers take advantage of the loopholes in the, what's it called, labor laws, where, do you understand? And so they just abuse it. When I worked in the bank, I used to work in one of the banks before, when I worked there, I had long, unnecessary hours. And exactly what Andy expressed here happened to me. I had the boss once who would sit and say, if I don't leave the, in fact, his mindset was, you had to work late. And we were
For no
young
reason.
then. Yeah, you have to work.
That's
No, you don't. Like the president, it's like the president steps into his motorcade last and steps out first. So nobody leaves this office until I leave. I'm the king of
President
this
of the office.
the president of the office. And we bought that until we started reading. We got in contact with some HR guy who mentioned, he said, look, you must know the policy of this organization. And so we went through all of that and saw that, hey, 5 is 5. Oh.
But one thing I want to add to that is in a scenario where you actually need people to work later, not just for FaceTime, not just for the sake of it, I think sometimes employers don't appreciate their employees enough, because I've worked in places where, because I'm so appreciated, I on my own, I'm willing to actually, I don't need to be told to actually do the extra mile. But as you say, it's when you have this expectation where you have to come by this time. However, when it's closing time,
You can't leave.
there's no real closing time. Then you get a bit resentful, and then you don't want to put your best foot forward. So I think if we can actually appreciate effort where it's put in, people on their own. I work as an independent consultant as well. So I've done maybe a strategy for an organization where people will work on weekends on their own. They choose to because they actually buy into the vision of the organization. They feel adequately compensated. When they raise concerns are addressed. So I think it's a relatively healthy working environment that actually enables people to put in the extra effort where need be. People work on holiday and things like that.
But that commitment which you speak about is what sometimes is lacking with employees, because I've been on both sides of the table and I have people who work for me. It's not always that
Of
you
course,
get people
of
to come.
course.
And the reason why you say you are appreciated where you work is because you go out of your way to get this done. And I tell you, employers notice this. And so that's why certain people stand out. Okay. But when we come to Nigeria, the bigger picture, each time the budget is announced, you hear somebody doing the mathematics. If they divide this, everybody can go home with 3 million and we just go. This oil is our own, so we should share the money equally. And so this is now in our heads, where beyond work environment, the average Nigerian feels everything should be done for me, which is why our president said something about lazy Nigerian youths. So this is now a national mindset where there's a bit of entitlement, and there's also the demand for you must be committed.
There isn't a bit, there is a lot.
A lot of demand that you must be
undeserved.
Undeserved. I mean, that's why it's entitlement. You don't see any reason why you should put in value, but you want it. So that's why it's
and as I
entitlement.
said in the opening segment of this discussion, is that there's an unreasonable expectation from employers and employees. You know, there's a theory that no matter how much you do for your staff, your maids, your drivers, your chefs, whoever they are, they would never like you. There's a theory out there that no matter how much you do that, they hate you, because most Nigerians, and this is not me talking, this is what the theory is, believe that instead of them getting rich, they'll rather pull a rich person down to their level. They'll rather see more people suffer than actually them investing in themselves to get richer. So no matter how much you do for your employees, pay their children's school fees, send them on vacation, give them days off, whatever, they still hate you. They still believe that you have somehow rid them of their opportunity to succeed. So giving this theory, how do we fix it? How do we fix that mindset that you also can work as hard as I have worked, to become successful? There's no need dragging another person down, pulling down another man's business because you feel like that person is ridding you of some opportunity for you to be like them.
Honestly, I don't know if you can. Maybe only God can change some people.
See, God has to be tired of us at some point. Because the amount of things we just say, God, it's up to you. This is above me.
You have to
watch that video.
You have to cut God the slack on this one, first of all.
I say this because you are right. I see, I've tried to advocate for employees a lot, but if I look at it from the other perspective, when you come to maybe domestic care, for example, you have drivers that, as you say, you have done what is you probably won't even do maybe for your relative, and at the same time they feel so entitled. So I don't honestly know. Sometimes they say life will humble you. I have a specific example where there's this driver that I'd asked him, I was like, please, can he help me wash the car? It was in the afternoon. And he said, how dare I ask him at this hot sun that he's tired of the labor in our house, but he doesn't do anything. And I'm like, so is it me that will wash the car when you're the one employed to do that? So in that case, I think he then went away, maybe worked for someone else, and the grass wasn't greener on the other side. So I think when he came back, he was humbled. So I think sometimes other situations where if you find yourself in a situation where you see a different treatment, then maybe in hindsight you can actually appreciate where you're coming from. But I don't know if that there's a scheme or mechanism or something that you can actually do to change people who fundamentally have a different mindset. It's a kind of
Before Lekadi
reorientation.
answers, I have my own proposed solution. So like when I worked in the UK, at the earlier stage, we got paid by the hour. Do you feel that would work? If people know that if you work from 8 to 10, you get paid for 8 to 10. If you work from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., you get paid from 8 to, for that time. Do you think it would make employers and employees more committed?
I think so, because I think people would, there's this vacuum in paying monthly and not. I used to explain to employees, because I run some businesses of my own, and I used to explain to them that you need to, what you earn, if you divide what you earn by the number of days you work in a month, you know how much your value is. Is it worth it? So I think by the hour, if that is done, people would want to work harder to earn their full entitlement by rights. You understand? So yeah, by the hour is good. But it may not.
It's not really feasible.
It's not feasible in our country. But if they should work towards it.
So I pay my employees. I have 14 full-time employees, and I pay them monthly. But what I do to ensure that I get value for the money I'm paying, I ask them to send in daily reports of what they've done throughout the entire day. So they resume at the office at 9, and they typically close at 6, although they stay later, as I said, which is stipulated in the employment letter.
It's good you're honest.
Oh, very honest. I have very high expectations of my staff, because when I was an employee, I was giving my bosses very 100%. High quality jobs. So high quality performances. But I asked them to send in daily reports after they're done to me to ensure that from 8 to 9, this is what I did. From 9 to 10, this is what I did. And by doing that as an employer, I can see that every day they're coming into the office and being useful.
They're even looking for what to do.
Looking for what to do to ensure they can fill in that report. But I noticed that before I did that, I would ask them, well, what did you do today? Oh, you know. And I'll find some of them on Facebook, Instagram, on my dime. So I had to change that. So that's another thing for employers. You can also hold your staff accountable to ensure that they don't just feel entitled. Okay, I've come to work from 8 to 5, so pay me my salary. So that's another way, another solution I believe would be helpful to most employers. You're going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that it's just an orientation thing, and it has to be consistent. Well, some people are employed, and then even after the training, there isn't that change management, continuous orientation. It is a continuous process, because the mind works like practice. If you're not practicing that information in which you want people to have that enlightenment, if it isn't put in consistently, people would forget about it, right? And so because we're stuck in our old ways, we are limited to who we are based on what we were exposed to, or we have been exposed to, the knowledge in which we are limited to. We tend to restrict ourselves unknown to us. You understand? So when there is a high expectation and you have a person who is restricted, you get no results. Do you understand? So in most cases, you as the employer you have to consistently give orientations on what you want to be done, and then you don't stick within the box. Sometimes you have to go outside the box. Okay, you're in the work environment, but you need to be vast in this knowledge. You need to be vast in this area. I mean, someone operates the camera, and you don't always have to stick with the camera. Sometimes you need to know how to write the scripts. You know, so that orientation can drive people into achieving results. And remember, you're in business for profit at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You really cannot waste your time on anyone who wants to pull your profitability. It puts you on the lower end.
And I'm glad you said that, because I'm actually thinking in my mind as I'm nodding my head, if we look at this on the wider scope as we, the citizens, as the employer, and government leaders as the employees, how are we implementing what you've just said in the Nigerian scope? how are we doing in holding our leaders accountable? How are we doing asking them, okay, Mr. President, Mr. Governor, Mrs. Senator, you know, you've been in office for 4 years now. You know, give me your breakdown, like I do with my employees. Give me your 8 to 9. What were you doing then? What have you accomplished for the Nigerian people? Who are your employers? Joy.
Yeah.
We don't read enough. So you talked about the budget release. I don't know how many of us actually go through, whether it's our state budget, the national budget, to actually understand, okay, like what are the expenditures and what are we expecting from this budget? What are the results? So if this was delivered as it's written, what are the things that we should see? So if you don't have the information, I don't see how you then hold someone accountable. Because you talked about you as an employer, you have the job description of your employees, the expectations you have of them, the things that you know as an accountant, as a this, as a that, these are the things that you should fill. So I don't know that we educate ourselves enough as a people on what the country actually is supposed to deliver, whether it's your governor, whether it's your House of Assembly member, whether it's your senator. So as I said, once you do that, I don't know that there's a mechanism. And I don't know how much we actually clamor. You know, in the States, they'll say, or in the UK, go and meet your MP.
Yeah.
I don't know how much we actually then, because most times when people have the opportunity to do that, they want contract. They don't go and say, what have you done for our people? You know
Dig
what I mean? When
boreholes,
they have
build school. But in fact, they even tell them, don't do that one, no. Give
Just
me
give
so
them
much
yes,
infrastructure.
yes.
So when we're guilty of it, because when people talk about corruption in the big sense, others try to remind you and say, okay, yes, but then when you also bribe that gate man, when you also in your little ways, when FRC stop you and you're in a rush and you don't want to go to mobile court and you're like, oh God, now do you
Take
get
this
like
one.
we're part of the problem.
Wet
So I
the
think
hands.
we ourselves have to actually be honest, read, educate ourselves, and then I think we then can galvanize ourselves into, you know, like now, social media is used as a tool. When, you know, Ruga came out, or this COSA thing, or there are different issues that people actually put themselves together and do a protest about, but I don't know how much we actually care. That's the truth about these issues. So as I said, I don't really think we do, because most times when people have the opportunities to meet with the leaders, they're not talking about these issues. They're not talking about...
But does the onus just fall on we, the citizens, as the employers, or also our employees as leaders? Do you believe that they also, due to their sense of entitlement, I mean, a politician walks in here right now, the first thing, everyone, in fact,
Would
even
stand
during
up
this
to
interview,
greet.
we'll all have to stand up to say good morning, distinguished, or good morning, honorable, or whatever. Do you believe that their sense of entitlement is as a result of our attitude as employers, we the Nigerian people, a result of our attitude towards them? Or do you believe that they are the cause of the way that we treat them? What do you think, Lekadi?
Thank you for asking me about politics. Well, I've been trying to reduce my energies in politics, but then again, I start thinking, politics is also a lifestyle. So let me answer that question. We elevate our leaders to that demigod level.
So we are the cause.
We are a part of the cause. When in their own side, from their own point of view, do you know how stringent it is to get into that position as a senator, as a House of Reps, as the president? They go through a lot. And I'm not talking about in front of right before the camera, before us, where you see them campaigning and things. There's a lot that happens behind. There are a lot of deals that are being sealed. There are a lot of contracts unspoken that are being put on ground, like, oh boy, we're putting you in here. And then there are those who are controlling the system. You understand? So when these men finally come up there, they're like gods. So the system generally is not in proper place to follow those channels where things should be done correctly. Deliberately, if I may say, in my opinion, I think some people put these systems deliberately to favor.
So, Lekadi, it's good that you're talking about systems. So, for instance, the National Assembly that was inaugurated in June, Friday, they've gone on a 10-week recess. So you've worked for 2 months, and you're taking 2 months off. And so there's the systems, which is the problem. But like she has said, we have social media, we have public forums, we have the media. Why aren't we changing the systems as the people? We are the employers.
Andy,
but we wait for 4 years.
Andy, sorry, Dan.
No, go ahead.
The orientation is the problem. People don't know. People don't know, are not aware of these channels. And who's putting the energy to let people know these things? That look, this is how you need to go to hold these people accountable. People don't know. So we sit down, the best we know. Let me tell you what we do best. We talk a lot. We are good at that. We are the best judges. We are the best advisors. We just talk in our small spaces. Okay, we have the phone, we have a little bit of data, and then we go, and this is that, this is that, this is that, and that's where it ends. Nobody knows that channel to apply pressure. We don't know how to create pressure groups. We don't know how to be members. If you call people together and say, okay, this is a pressure group for good governance. Bring 1,000, let's fund this thing. Leave this thing. How can you be talking about that? And when we haven't eaten. You know, people don't know how important it is. Social media doesn't work like magic. Influencers belong to pressure groups. Pressure groups have members. Members come together on a topic and they consistently talk about it, and then the bandwagon follows. You understand? So some people think, oh, okay, so like you said, the Koza issue or the Ruga issue is because certain influencers decided to come together and agree that we have to fight this to the bottom. A lot of people don't know this. And I think that's where the problem is. No enlightenment, and I stick to that.
Wow.
But is it just that? Because, you know, as the issues we talked about, nobody had to tell you. If you looked at Twitter or, you know, the trending topics,
yes,
nobody told somebody, go and write about that. They were just enraged on their own.
You
like,
may not know
not
that.
right.
That
wouldn't know
local
that.
organizing
You wouldn't
actually
know.
Right.
does happen
There are
in
organizations
those
for that.
spaces.
That will sit, there are organizations
Yeah.
that will sit behind and say, okay, and that is an
This is what we're
influential
going to
organization
do.
who already have
Yeah.
these followers, and they already have something they call cells. We give you an instruction, they wake up to that instruction. So, yeah.
We're running out of time, but I would have loved to mention, you know, as you rightly said that even the social media tool that we all keep saying is just at the tip of our fingers. We can now say something and, you know, it would explode throughout the entire world. The reality is that there are always people behind that, and there are always consistent people, I should say, behind that kind of movement. Look at Ruga today. Look at the Koza issue. Most times it comes, it trends for a week, and after that, it dies off. You know, because of that consistency. I think Nigerians as a whole, we lack that consistency to see through any movement, to see through the fruition and the sustenance of any movement. I was watching a documentary on Netflix the other day about the Cambridge Analytica issue with Trump. This was an organized group of people that were creating fake messages. They targeted the minds of susceptible people and created fake messages that would ensure that they voted for Trump. So are we thinking strategically in the way that we use social media, you know, in order to create government reforms to ensure the implementation of certain policies that benefits the wider populace? So we need to start thinking about that in this conversation of entitlement. So lady, gentleman, Joy, Lekadi, thank you so much for joining us on today's segment.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having us.
You're most welcome. We'll take a short break right now. When we return, more on The Weekend Show. Don't go anywhere.